What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here, giving an update for the Quarter Arcade Challenge. Also, now it's called the Quarter Jukebox Challenge, so maybe I should change the name of this video series. I guess DraftKings added an arcade mode, and maybe to avoid any confusion, they changed the name. So, the Quarter Jukebox Challenge, I won't remember to say that. But the last month or so has been pretty terrible, actually. I mean, we haven't been losing a ton, but we've been losing. I switched a couple of weeks ago to making lineups by hand, which I think is probably the last video that I posted, and that's been helpful. That's actually made me and forced me to assess my game and how I'm actually constructing lineups, which I think has been such a big improvement over just letting Fantasy Cruncher pump out 50 lineups or just letting Daily Fantasy Nerd pump out 50 lineups. So it's really allowed me to take ownership over my lineups. It's allowed me to know what's going on. I've been more aware of who I have. I'm more aware of my ownerships. I can control it. So it's something I've really enjoyed. Definitely had some learning curve, but that's okay. I'm still okay with making them by hand. This week I thought was a little bit notable, so I wanted to point out what I did. I thought it was worth a discussion. So if you've been following along, you know that I will play 50 lineups in the main Quarter Arcade. It's usually a $10,000 prize pool. That's the one that goes live at the beginning of the week with all the other contests. As it gets closer to Thursday and that Quarter Arcade starts to fill up, usually, not always, but usually DraftKings will open up a second Quarter Arcade. It's usually much smaller. This week's was $2,000 in the prize pool. It's usually much smaller, but it's still 50 entries. Only a handful of weeks have I ever seen a third Quarter Arcade open up, which would be like, I think it was like $500 in the prize pool or something like that. So they get gradually smaller. Usually we get to two, rarely get to three, but it's also rarely just one. So if you've been following, what I do is in that second one that opens up, I like to do something freaky. I'm trying to test different theories. I'm trying to be more volatile. And that's probably where a lot of our losses have come in the last couple of weeks. It's when I lock in two players into every single lineup and one of them misses the cut and it's kind of, crappy on all of your lineups. So I want to try something new, which is still volatile, but I want to do something different, which we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's just look at the regular Quarter Arcade here. So this is it, $10,000 prize pool. So this had 11,900, I'm sorry, it had 47,000 people in it. Nearly 12,000 got paid. We did okay. So we returned 1770 on 1250 in entries. Had a couple of pretty good lineups here inside the top 1,000. If you've watched any of my other videos or my preview from last week, you knew what guys I was interested in. We were really killing it when Lingmirth was the first round leader. I talked about him in my preview last week. We had significantly more than the field of David Lingmirth, who was only 3.5% owned. So the fact that he shoots a 65 on Thursday and doesn't sniff that again for the rest of the week, that hurt. Our projected winnings were a lot better, obviously, on Thursday than they were on Sunday, but we did okay here. We turned a profit. We got a lot of guys through, made a lot of cuts. In general, we avoided the Dustin Johnson and John Rahm, at least more than the field did, so we were okay with those guys getting cut. But here's what I did in the second one. And you can see, okay, so what's interesting about this second one is, so the first Quarter Arcade had 47,000 entries. This one had 9,400. So, and it's still 50 max. So 50 divided by, what did I say, 47,000 times 100. So in the main Quarter Arcade, we have 0.1% of all the lineups. In this one, we have 0.5% of the lineups. So obviously still not a large percentage of all the possible lineups, but we have 5 times as many lineups compared to how many people are in the field in this Quarter Arcade. So in theory, our chances of winning are much better over here, just because we own a larger percentage of the actual teams in play. So what I did here, and if you figured it out by looking at my screen, is I ran a 50 lineup train. Um, that means every single lineup, all 50 of them, were identical. So here's mine. So you're looking at it, okay? So these were the 6 guys that I decided to run in a 50 lineup train, and I'm going to try to explain what I was thinking here. So this is something I've been wanting to do. So the way that some of these GPPs are fairly top heavy, it's sometimes difficult to grind out a profit. Meaning we're going to have very volatile swings. And if you've heard me talk about this a bunch, where I'm cool with that. Like, I know playing GPPs, and especially in this challenge, we're going to have incredible weeks, and then we might have 3 months in a row where we just don't cash anything. I'm aware of that. I'm cool with that style. It's fine, but it's not really like grinding out wins or winnings each and every week. With that being said, some of these GPPs are pretty top heavy. So winning it is awesome, but like the first couple payouts kind of suck. They're usually like double or just triple your buy-in. So what I was thinking was, okay, if I can just make a lineup that cashes, min cashes, so 25 cents into 50 cents doubles our money. Now 12.50 turns into $25. So the point is, okay, well, if we can double our money every single week, okay, well, we're not going to retire anytime soon, but that's a great ROI. So and then obviously, like, if you get to the next level where it's 75 cents, okay, now we're tripling our buy-in. So you can see what I'm getting at here. Now 979th, it ended up being just at the top end of the first pay bracket. So if we would have been 960, we would have tripled up here. But instead, we just doubled up, which is fine. We cashed. So a couple things about lineup construction. I went back and forth on this a lot. I probably thought I was making a cash game lineup. It didn't probably turn out to be that way at all. But I probably wanted safer players, just because if we cash one, we cash all 50. So to me, I knew. So we had Duffner, which I tweeted about this. I didn't know he was going to be 6%, but I knew people were going to overlook this guy. And before his miscut last week, he was awesome. So I kind of I thought he was more cash than he ended up being. I thought he was going to be 15%, and I had him in here. Lucky for us, he's only 6%. Lingmirth is a guy that I thought we were taking a risk on. Sink, despite being 6% owned, has been playing awesome. I've talked about him week over week on here. If you pay attention, I've talked about him constantly. He's always at the top of my key stats. Jason Day, I thought would be a little under owned just because of the way his stats are, but I thought he could win it. He had a pretty good week. Outside of Thursday. Matsuyama, who I think he had the best scoring average here coming in. I thought he was pretty chalky. He ended up being chalk and had a bad week. And then Tway, who is a guy that I rode for a long time. I just thought the price was wrong. So I think he was $6,500, and he's been playing really well. So we were on him as well. So in my brain, this was a cash game lineup, or more cash than GPP. Probably didn't turn out that way. Probably turned out to be a pretty good GPP lineup just with some of the ownership percentages that we had. But that's not what I was envisioning. Now, why did I do this? And a guy on Twitter raised, and sorry, I don't remember your username, but he raised a really good point when I posted this. He said, why didn't you just play a $12 single entry GPP? Right? I paid $12.50 for 50 lineups. Why didn't I just pay $12 for one if I was going to use the same lineup? And I've thought long and hard about that. It's a really valid question. And my point being is, I think I can make better lineups than the rest of the field. And I think I can do that over infinity. So I think that every time I make a lineup, for the most part, right? Every time I make a lineup, I think it's like better than average. I have a plus expected value in this. So by playing this as a single entry, I would have leveled the playing field. Okay, where my one lineup goes up against everyone else's one lineup. What I did here is I took 50 lineups, all with the same guys, and took 6 guys who I knew I was going to be so overweight on compared to the rest of the field. Like Hideki is my highest owned guy, 20% owned. I had him at 100%. So I'm way overweight on all of these guys. Now, in theory, over infinity number of tournaments, I think that I can pick players better than the rest of the field, so I'm willing to go significantly overweight on them. So I think that my edge is even greater if I do 50 lineups of the same guys as opposed to doing one lineup with everyone else's one lineup, if that makes sense. I just think I create a bigger edge by trying to construct a lineup, trying to construct one lineup that I roll out 50 times and play that against the rest of the field. So, and then of course, in a single entry, everyone is playing the max entries. In the quarter arcade, I'm sure a lot of people are, but there's also a lot of people who are not. So again, we have a little built-in edge there. So there was a couple of reasons, but those were the two big ones. The fact that I would be max entering when I know that there's some percentage of guys that are not. And then just the fact that I think my edge is big enough with one lineup that if I 50x it, I think that's better than just doing one against everyone else's one. So there you go. I hope that explains it. Actually, so the results. So we have actually lost a little bit recently, but we're still, in terms of ROI, 18% ROI would be pretty thrilled with that for the rest of our lives in every tournament that we play. So can't be too upset about that. We're up to 600 entries, which is pretty cool. I've tried a bunch of different things. I will continue to do so moving forward. And if you have any questions, let me know. Tweet me. It's @DFS on demand. Leave a comment below, and I'll talk to you guys soon. See you.